you might recall a time where we had a surge of businesses moving everything into the cloud. Like the cloud was the new thing. Everything needed to go into the cloud. What is happening with that movement is that because we are increasing so much, actually, like exponentially, the amount of data that we collect, everything is smart.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox, Expert's Perspective. Joining us today from the Netherlands, we got Tim van der Horst. So really excited to have you on the show. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
Tim, I always like to start off by learning a bit more about the guest's history and their past. So maybe talk to us a bit about your career, how you ended up in your role leading Europe for OnLogic. Yeah, maybe walk us through your career a little bit.
Got about 24 years, career in or around retail. Started in business to consumer and then made my way through B2B, mostly retail through channel, which was very interesting. And in all of that, in all of those experiences, what always appealed to me was, having the brand and having the product of your own, and really, positioning that and make it help shape that connection and the relationship with the customer. At some point, OnLogic came by, and I initially started with OnLogic in 2016. So that's, almost 10 years ago. I think this year is going to be the 9th. In working, direct to customer B2B model with our own product line, which is super exciting. And I've been in a lot of the areas within our business, either touched them or led the departments, and have been responsible for our European site for, I think, the last 6 years now. And then I think the most exciting thing there is that I saw it grow, or I saw it like 10x over the course of my time at OnLogic. So that's pretty much the fastest growth that I have ever experienced a company go through.
That's awesome. And maybe talk to us a bit about OnLogic. I know it's in the computing space. Maybe talk to us a bit about what do you feel like OnLogic's unique positioning is into the market and how they're entering the space.
Yep. So the thing that most appealed me to the organization is essentially, an eye to detail, so what is really interesting is we have we serve a niche market, which is industrial computing, right? The industrial edge computing, like it's morphing into more of an edge industry now. But the product itself has such an interesting proposition. It's colored bright orange, for instance. There's a lot of eye for detail in the design, the way it's built, very customizable products by trade. So making sure that the customers can kind of put them together exactly the way that they want. And really feeling like a consumer brand almost in a business to business space for, industrial use, was something that I really liked. Like that really, again, the eye for detail that goes into that design, an interesting looking product that first appealed to me. And then as I got to know the organization better, I mean, one of the biggest things I think that sets us apart from at least companies that I have been either part of or close to is the culture. And that's for me, that was that's the biggest differentiator for OnLogic. We make hardware like others make hardware. It's specific for a particular industry, but the way that we do it with the eye for detail, with the customization abilities, and with the people behind it that shape that culture, where we really try to put the customer at the center of what we do, that's really special.
No, that's really interesting. And I know a big part of what you were brought in for is European expansion. Like, where did you see the biggest opportunity in the market? What were some of your challenges, especially on like the digital front, like basically going into a new territory or vastly expanding in the territory?
Yeah, that's a good question. actually, since early days, pretty much since 2003 when OnLogic was founded, our primary channel for sales was ecom, right? We've driven a lot of ecom through, or a lot of our sales through the front end through ecom. Started with component sales, and then starting developing our own chassis for the PCs, and then ultimately designing our own hardware motherboards and kind of getting putting that together to become ultimately the product that we or the product line that we offer today. And still we have that main ecom self-serve customer portal at the center of our business. And as you can imagine, if that is just for one area, let's say North America, in your example, having that up in English is fairly simple. You have one language, you got one large area or surface area geography to serve. When it comes to expansion, geographic expansion, primarily in an area that is Europe that has over 20 different languages, currencies, that's where that becomes a challenge. I think that is also the thing that has, up until this point, and it's kind of a cool segue into our opportunity right now that we both see in the market as well as for ourselves, is that it was, it takes a lot of resources to replicate your efforts in all of these countries. So really scaling as an organization is hard if you don't want to, just grow your costs linear to your potential revenues from those new areas. So what you want to do at some point is you try to scale. And how can you scale? Well, if you have, translation engines, machines, or those sorts of things, or you can serve multiple countries from a single area, which we have been doing for quite some time. We've been serving most of Europe from our main location in the Netherlands. And we've been doing that in mainly, 3 languages, which is English, because we're originally, we're an American company. And we added Dutch because we're located in the Netherlands. And then we added German because Germany happens to be one of the largest industrial markets in Europe. But then, how do you go beyond that? So language became a thing where you don't want to hire a bunch of people, and duplicate everything that you already have. And now what we are seeing is an incredible innovation in the space of AI, and also allowing you to do translations or transcreation beyond what we have held possible, I think, a few years ago. So that innovation is happening very quickly. And I think that is exactly touching on your question around what are the biggest opportunities for us as an organization is everything that has to do with AI. AI and edge computing, which we'll probably get into a little bit more detail of, is meant to grow exponentially over the next couple of years. And it's we're only scratching the surface. If you just envision the amount of progress AI and executing inferencing AI models has made over the course of just 1 year, this past year, is incredible. Like, innovations as DeepSeek, just making those models way more efficient. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi, not great, but you can do it. Makes this an incredibly large opportunity for anything computer hardware, from like the big beefy performance rich units to the more lightweight and cost effective or cost efficient nodes or gateways, if you want to call them that way, to do your model execution on premise. So that's absolutely the largest opportunity.
And when you look at AI, especially the business that you guys are in, there's a whole bunch of ways you can implement AI. You can implement AI all the way from the warehouse to the online store to internal tools to the actual products themselves. Like, where are your biggest bets with AI internally as a business?
Yeah, I think that you have to. There's always a tendency to try and focus or to try to center around a couple of main areas of where we see AI thrive, or where the biggest opportunities are. It's a really good question in the sense of, here is everything that you could do with it. Now what are we doing with it? I think that the the most tangible things that people will be able to relate to are things that have to do with vision. If you think about quality control, right? Think about your conveyor belt that has your order in a little box or a crate or on a tray or however that's set up, and they just zoom by 50 kilometers per hour, camera overhead, and just snaps pictures of every one of them, and the AI models or AI processing units would be able to just take that snap and determine, based on the order number or a barcode associated or however. Again, this is where creativity is kind of endless here, right? It's indefinite because you can run it any way you want, but the picture can be analyzed depending on your performance at a very, very high and fast rate to just see, hey, is everything there? That can go for your orders as a whole, but it could also go for something that you manufacture. A quality control. We had an example of one of our customers that had a demo for a car key quality assurance, where the buttons on the car, it could define where the lines were if there was paint missing, all with vision and at super high speed. So that's one. You have the areas of predictive maintenance. There's the autonomous, warehouse movements that are really interesting. I think the retail by itself has a lot of potential because it touches, anything from just customer experience. So language model type stuff that you can do with chats or support to, your warehouse automations to your inventory management. So I guess if you want, a more holistic answer, I guess the specific one is, hey, there's these specific applications that are very heavily vision based, but there's also the breadth of anything that you can do with language modeling to give your customers a good experience from front to back end. And by itself and by its nature, retail is a big candidate for, anything AI. And I guess, and this may be a long answer to a more simple question, but ultimately, if you have the right device for the right purpose, it really, the possibilities are really endless, and you can set it up to do anything that you want to do. And that's ultimately where, we focus on the hardware. We have partners for a lot of software applications, but hardware by itself can be used for pretty much anything you could imagine doing on the AI side. I hope that's, a little bit of an answer to, or at least going towards what you were looking for.
No, that's really insightful. And when we look at, especially now leaning a bit more broadly to digital, obviously on the back of COVID, we're seeing kind of flat or decreasing budgets in some cases on the digital side as kind of spend normalizes. Maybe talk to us a bit about, have you looked at AI for either cost consolidation or for making sure that you're achieving the right benchmarks on anything from ad spend to internal efficiencies? How have you looked at it as like a P&L owner on the digital side?
It's an interesting question because, again, I think there's a lot of opportunities in that space. I personally haven't really gotten to that point of using AI for those types of analysis. If you look internally, it's mostly looking at the efficiency gains and challenging, what you have considered as the status quo within your own organization for a long time because the technology or the resources weren't there, and seeing and trying to determine what are those savings that you can realize with AI and implementing AI tools. We do have an entire AI team within the organization that is both external facing to our customers to help them and consult them or with them on what they could possibly do and use AI for to improve their business processes and make things either more efficient or smarter or more cost effective. But they also do that internally, which is really interesting because as we go on this journey, or as we are on this journey together, really we just keep finding areas where we can implement and just try to remain that focus and continuously prioritize which are the things that are going to have the biggest impact, and then start with those. So it's a really interesting journey to be on there. And I think your question hits on one of those areas that I have not, yet investigated, or not applied to that extent. But there again, your imagination is the only limitation here. You can train your models and basically use it for everything. You actually brought me on, you actually gave me an idea there. So it's definitely something I'm gonna take back and see what we can do there. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. To your point, like a lot of folks are just starting to think about it. It depends. Obviously, you guys have very niche products, so I've seen people use it from anything to helping to write copy, to generating images, to doing analysis for conversion. It's kind of like on the analyst side, like what are my competitors doing, things like that. So, no, it's interesting to hear, and maybe this is something that we should have gone through a bit earlier. Do you maybe want to explain to the folks listening what edge computing is, if they're not super familiar with it, and then we could touch a bit on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And because we've used the term for a couple of times now. So edge computing is essentially the concept of bringing your decision-making, your data collection and decision-making to the edge of your network on-premise. You might recall a time where we had a surge of businesses moving everything into the cloud. Like the cloud was the new thing. Everything needed to go into the cloud. What is happening with that movement is that because we are increasing so much, actually, like exponentially, the amount of data that we collect, everything is smart. Just think about not just the industrial spaces, right? But you can imagine just your home and all the smart devices that you have, all the data they would potentially collect, even your smartphone with the health apps. Like there's so much data, that data points, measures, sensor data that is going into databases nowadays. You can't even, begin to comprehend the amount of data that is creating. Now, in times where that was not yet the case, or not to the extent it is today, sending the data to the cloud was your design, right? We're going to do this, and this is all the things that are going into the cloud. We have this big data lake, which might turn into data swamp if you're not careful with how you organize things. And then you're going to have, your dashboards and your reporting and try to, make sense of that data and get that information back out. What happens in the cloud is there's a couple of aspects, right? There's the actual transmission of that data to the cloud and back, which is called your data bandwidth, essentially. So how much data are you sending back and forth, an amount? Then in the cloud itself, there's storage, right? Because the data needs to go somewhere. So it's on a drive, on a server, in a server room, or a server park, somewhere, or on multiple locations if there's redundancy. And then the third is there's compute, because there's the server that actually, if you're making a request or you're sending the data to the cloud, it needs to be processed, right? And then the processor is doing calculations and math and those sorts of things. For each of those components for the cloud, there's a cost. It's fairly straightforward. Now you can imagine if you just increase the amount of stuff that goes to the cloud, all those three components are becoming, higher requirements, and you're going to end up at higher costs if you do the same thing and you just bring everything there. If you incrementally, exponentially increase the amount that you're creating and generating, it's just going to increase, exponentially the cost that you have to account for. If you're then talking about edge and the movement that is happening right now, is imagine if you just say, okay, so there's this machine. Let's say we have a conveyor belt in a production facility. It's not really retail, but this is the quickest example I have. And it has a cycle time. So it's basically, do you like beer?
I love beer, personally.
There we go. Okay, so beer. We got a beer factory, right? So it's filling the bottles. And then it's filling, I don't know, 100 bottles per minute. And there's a sensor, a counter, whatever, bottles go by, and it counts the amount of bottles that were filled over time. So it checks, a box, 100 per minute. That's the average. There's a threshold. It says, 95 is good, 105 is good. Everything below 95, we should be concerned. Everything above 105, probably they're getting filled halfway. So there's thresholds and there's boundaries of what we need to do. Now with cloud and the collection of that data on premise or on that machine and then sending it to the cloud, the effect is that every single minute it's going to send 100, 98, 97, 103, 102. And that ends up just cluttering your entire database, while that is perfectly within the bandwidth and the boundaries of what you think is acceptable. Edge computing is the concept of taking all of that to your local premise and basically saying, okay, so we have this machine that does this. Whenever that value is between the 95 and the 105, it is green, it's good, nothing has to go to the cloud. Now, wherever that value is lower or higher, we are going to send that and then we're going to do something with it. The concept of edge computing goes far beyond, like this is one fairly simple example to say, hey, this is how you reduce the amount of data that you actually send to the cloud by actually assessing what it is and making decisions on the spot based on the data locally. And that you can essentially just extrapolate across the entire plant, right? You can do that in different ways, on different machines, on different places. And then the next step is you can apply AI to then start learning from those data points and to take actions and to feed models, et cetera, et cetera. So you could envision an entire ecosystem of edge devices that together build that edge computing solution where you just have a locally centered ecosystem of data collection, processing, decision-making, and then, recently AI training, modeling, and application. And that can go, back into feeding your inventory management levels, supply chain triggers for inventory, locationing, autonomous robots, whatever. And everything that happens there is usually also faster than when you have to go to cloud and back. Now, the thing I will say is that in a lot of instances and use cases that are being built or have been built right now is that there's always a combination of edge and cloud. They usually don't go separate from one another. And that's also because you want to connect, because you can have multiple plans. You want to manage and check and monitor and act and make decisions on, multiple facilities. Perhaps if you don't connect them back, you're going to lose that ability to, they won't be able to learn from one another. So there's those aspects as well. But at a high level, that's what edge is. It's as small or as big as you can make it. But in the essence it's the data processing, assessment and decision-making right there where it's being generated.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today, Tim. This has been awesome. We'll really excited to see this podcast go live, Tim. We really, really enjoyed you coming on, and thanks so much.
Thank you too. I enjoyed it.
The E-Commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the E-Commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.